got everybody here we need to start with, right? It's 7 o'clock. So I'll just introduce myself while I'm here. My name is Mike Reeder, and been asked to help ask questions this afternoon or this evening. And Mitch Moravec is going to ask some questions that are coming from the group out watching us. This forum is sponsored by the Hillsborough-Wade CAC, the West CAC, and the Southwest CAC. And as I announced earlier, we have 161 people registered to attend this forum. So welcome to the District C Candidate Forum. I think it's really remarkable, and we appreciate everyone here participating, the candidates as well as those joining us for the Zoom, because it's our job as citizens to be informed and to participate in the process. So the agenda is that we're going to ask each candidate to make a 2-minute opening statement. And following that, we will have some prepared questions for the candidates that I believe have been shared with the candidates. If I remember, have I been properly informed? Did you folks get those questions or no? No?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And the folks who are watching, they can submit questions in the Q&A section after the prepared questions are responded to by the candidates. When you put a question in, please put a question in. Let's don't make a prolonged statement because we can't do that. And Mitch is going to be asking those questions, and I'm sure we'll have more questions and we'll be able to get to all the candidates. So you can always contact the candidates later to get those questions answered. You can also post something in chat, but nobody's going to be monitoring the chat. We'll do well to get through as many of the questions as we can. So with that, what I'm going to do is start asking the questions that were prepared by some folks that have been given to me to ask. And what I'm going to do is ask each candidate to respond to them. We're going to go in order alphabetically by last name. And then next question, we'll ask the next person in order. So we kind of rotate through that. So the first question, I'll ask Rob if he would be the first to respond to it.
Mike,
would you support local citizen-led engagement groups that are self-governing?
Hey, Mike, sorry to,
yes.
I mean, we're going to start with the introductions for all the candidates.
Oh, I beg your pardon. We are going to start with the introduction.
And I'm going to keep time for you on this first half. So hello, everyone. Just all I'm doing for now is keeping time. So I'm just keeping on my stopwatch. I'm just going to give you a wave when you got about 15 seconds left, and then I'll politely ask you to move on to the next candidate if we go beyond that. But thank you for the introductions. It is 2 minutes each. So Mike, back to you. You're welcome to.
Good catch. Thank you. So Rob, would you like to go first?
I can.
Okay.
You ready?
Ready.
All right. If everyone's listening, my name is Rob Baumgart. I'm running for City Council, District D. I have lived in the district over 20 years. I came to Raleigh from Iowa by way of NC State University. After my first 2 years, I dropped out of school and started a cell phone business. I was in the Village District for a number of years and along Hillsborough Street for a lot of years on 3 different occasions. So if you ever bought a cell phone from Chatterbox, it was probably me or one of my coworkers back then that sold you a phone. Did that for 17 years. 15 years ago, I started buying real estate in Raleigh and became a landlord. Some of you may know my first rental property was a fraternity house. I was 26. These boys were 19, 20, and 21 years old. And that was a great way to cut your teeth and learn how to be a landlord when you've got to manage 16, 17 boys when you yourself are still coming out of that stage of life. Since then, I've grown my real estate capacity, and that is my full-time career. My most recent transaction was purchasing a warehouse off South Saunders, and I leased it to a local charity known as SHIP Outreach Program, and they're operating 4 different charities out of that building now. I'm really excited about it and really excited about the partnership. I'm running for City Council as a follow-up to my application 2 years ago when Sage Martin vacated the seat. Of course, Stormy became our current council person. She's now running at large, leaving a vacated seat open, and I decided to go for it. I love the city. I love the people of the city. I'm excited for our growth. And I believe that a conservative candidate could do a good job of making sure we don't become one of our northern sister cities where the taxes are outrageous and people are fleeing. So if you have a conservative bone in your body, I'd recommend looking at robraleigh.com and considering filling out the top bubble on your ballot. I will be Rob Baumgart up at the top. That's my 2 minutes.
That's about 2 minutes. Thank you. Jane, would you please go next?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks everyone for being here tonight for the conversation. I really appreciate the opportunity to hear from all of the other candidates as well. I hope we're going to bring some great ideas forward for District D. My name is Jane Harrison. I'm running for Raleigh City Council to serve our district. I have a career in public service. I teach at NC State University, part of the Wolf Pack. I have several hats there. So I do research. I'm a scientist. I have both a background in environmental management and economics. So how do those two things intersect? I work for the North Carolina Sea Grant Program, which is part of NOAA, also based at NC State University. I'm faculty in the College of Natural Resources and the Agricultural and Resource Economics Department. I've worked with communities across the state to safeguard natural resources and to make investments in infrastructure. I've spent my career bringing people together, finding common ground, and advocating for solutions that require bold thinking, that require, working together across government, across the private sector, working with residents. And I believe those are the types of skills that are so valuable in a counselor. My priorities are community-led development, affordable housing, and environmental stewardship. I am supported by a diverse coalition in the city. I've been endorsed by the Wake County Democratic Party, Sierra Club, the North Carolina Police Benevolent Association, RWCA, and Run for Something, which helps and endorses progressive candidates that are authentically connected to their communities. I'll stop now. I think I'm at time.
Thank you. Todd, would you go next, please?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you all this evening. My name is Todd Kennedy. I'm running for Raleigh City Council District D. Raleigh is a wonderful city. I've had the good fortune of living here for over 25 years, and I'm a native of the region. I've built a career here in public infrastructure and the environment, a family, and I am dedicated to this community. That dedication has been demonstrated by more than 20 years of service and leadership here in the city with vital community organizations and city boards and commissions spanning issues of affordable housing, equity and inclusion, and the environment. The depth and breadth of my experience is one area that distinguishes me from other candidates in this race. We are coming out of a difficult period in our city's history, and we're now facing unprecedented growth. I want to serve on council to help shape our city's response to that growth, both the challenges and opportunities that it brings. I want a future embodied by shared prosperity, inclusiveness, and resilience. We need to work now at an inflection point in our community to move Raleigh forward. That is what this election is about, and that's why I'm running to be the independent representative of District D. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. And Jennifer, would you please go? Thank you.
Good evening, y'all. My name is Jennifer Truman. I'm running for District D. I am a designer. I'm a working mom. I'm a community leader, an advocate, and an optimist. And I'm building this campaign on the optimism I have for what Raleigh can be when we work together. I'm running because I believe we're at a critical moment. I truly believe that we can grow and welcome new neighbors while also supporting existing residents. I've lived in District D for 15 years. I went to NC State where I studied both civil engineering and architecture, and I never left because I fell in love with District D. I've lived all over the district, from Avon Ferry to Morgan Street, down by Lake Wheeler now. Now I work as a professional for a small local architecture firm. We work specifically with small businesses, and I run a small business. I live here with my husband, my kids, dogs, and our backyard chickens. Over the years, many of you have met me because I've been involved both professionally and personally in creating the buildings, places, and events where people gather to eat and play all over our city. I've long been an advocate going to city council about issues around housing, affordable housing, zoning reform, better transit and buses because I'm a frequent bus rider and a biker, and more options for walking and biking. These things help our small businesses and they help our residents. I truly believe that together we can build a different and better future for Raleigh based on equitable and sustainable growth, a budget that reflects our people and values, and increased transit choices and walkability. Those are the pillars and policies and background that I'm running on to be your next District D City Councilor.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here and for your opening statements. So now I think it's, go ahead. It's time to start with the structured questions. So we'll start with Rob. Rob, would you support local citizen-led engagement groups that are self-governing? Why and how would you support them?
Starting first twice, that's fine. So I don't mind citizens being involved and getting together, and I don't mind the city listening to them, and I think city councilors should listen to them. One of the reasons I ran was the fervent call to bring back the CACs, which I'm not necessarily in favor of bringing back the CAC in the way it was shaped back when it originally became part of our lexicon from the interstate highway system. And when our cities got cut in half, we had to make up for those areas of town outside of the tracks, the wrong side of the tracks, and make sure their voices were heard. I do think it's important. I do feel like the CACs over the last number of years that I've been involved in Raleigh have become very one-sided. And I'm fearful that if we get too much of an echo chamber going on with the CACs, and then it leads into the city council members, I don't think that's a good thing. I believe the engage.raleighNC.gov should be given a chance to work. We're living in 2022. We just came through a pandemic where everyone, but myself, as I explained, use Zoom on a regular basis and uses email and social media. There are ways to communicate with our citizens that are better than what we've done in the past. So I would look to promote that service that the city is currently working towards and get more people engaged in that manner. As far as citizens deciding to meet together, I am more than fine with them using our park system and our community centers in the park. I live right across from Carolina Pines Park, and there's a wonderful community center in there. We should supply internet. We should supply the ability to have rentable space and time slots, and that should continue. But I don't believe it should continue in the way the CACs were designed 50 years ago.
Thank you. Jane, would you respond to that question? Would you like me to repeat the question to you?
No, I have it. Thank you,
Okay.
Mike.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, I do support local citizen-led engagement groups that are self-governing and having city support so that we can get together, so that we can have community forums to talk about what's happening in our city, how things are developing, what are the plans. For me, a website is not enough to simply inform folks, what's going on. I really think of community engagement as a spectrum. So we can inform, we can simply tell people, hey, here's what's happening. We can ask for input, we can ask for feedback on plans. And then really the highest level of engagement is empowerment. It is our residents taking on some of the issues themselves. City government can't do it all. City councilors cannot do it all. We have to work hand in hand together. I reestablished the West Raleigh CAC last year after city support was taken away from these groups, because I felt like we had a vacuum in our part of the area to just talk through things. What is going on? We have had amazing speakers from the city staff, speakers talking about affordable housing, helping us to be better informed and educated so that we can advocate properly for what matters to us. So I do believe we need to revamp CACs. We need to provide leadership and support and tools to make them be successful.
Thank you, Jane. Todd, would you please respond? Do you want me to repeat the question for you?
No.
Got it? Okay.
Yes. So effective community engagement is critical to a well-functioning city and democracy. The most important feedback that can be received is through direct communications with city councilors. I am committed to doing that work, being visible in the community, being accessible, and being prepared to make the tough decisions to keep our city moving forward. With that said, I do believe the move by council to stop directly supporting the CACs was rash and unnecessary. But now that the decision has been made, we must look ahead and work together to craft the best community engagement program possible. I do see a role for citizen-led engagement groups that are self-governing. That could be a sort of CAC 2.0, where we address some of the shortcomings of the previous system. I think they would be especially helpful from an information exchange and feedback perspective, and I believe that is critical. And I think this would be part of a larger community engagement strategy. So just one part of many different ways that we would engage the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Jennifer, do you have the question in front of you? You repeat them?
I have it. Thank you.
You got it? Okay.
The short answer is yes. I support self-governed local citizen engagement groups. The right to assemble and discuss civic matters is foundational to our shared democracy. Everyone has the right to gather together, right? But also, to be clear, I mean that residents can form those groups. And as a counselor, I will make myself available to any group to attend their meetings when possible, to listen to the issues that they bring forward. But that doesn't mean that we should bring back the CAC system that we had. It doesn't mean that any one group will always be the group that's listened to. It doesn't mean that any one group should be listened to any more than another. One of the great things that we have gained from the pandemic is the ability to engage online, virtually. I was part of the Southwest Community Engagement Group's reinvention of itself, which is now entirely community-led, has been able to hold monthly meetings virtually and keep things going as a community for the folks that we serve. That said, that's only one way. There's plenty more ways, and I'm open to hearing what the other ones are, because I think that open dialogue between residents and their city councilor is really what we're all looking for. I pledged to restart the DDNA meetings where we used to meet. It used to be Saturday mornings with the Crowders, right? But we need to bring back a variety of meeting times and a variety of locations to come together with folks. And that's my commitment, to stay engaged with folks.
Okay. Great, thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the second question, and I know that you folks haven't, but I'll read the question for the benefit of those who are attending, obviously. It seems like the bigger Raleigh gets, the more development occurs, the further behind we get on basic services, from police to roads to picking up leaves and staffing at our parks. And this while property taxes and water rates go up. Shouldn't new development be bringing these costs down? What are we doing wrong that the development is costing citizens money when it should be a good thing for taxpayers? This is question number 2, and we'll start with Jane Harrison on this rotation.
Yeah. So our budget this year, it was an 8.5% increase over last year. That's a 2-cent property tax increase. And, some of the good things I think that came out of that increase were raises for city employees. So all employees received a 2% cost of living adjustment, which is still well below the inflation rate that we have today of more than 8%. Our first responders, our essential workers, 911 operators, firefighters, police, sanitation, parks, they need pay increases to afford to live in Raleigh and continue providing critical services. So I do understand why, in some ways, our budget has been increasing. So the question, what role can new development play in bringing costs down? I do think with new developments, what I want to see are community benefits. So sidewalks, updating our stormwater infrastructure, requirements for affordable housing. There are conditions that can be put in place as we infill, as we add density. And as a counselor, I will evaluate proposed developments to ensure that they are in alignment with our plans, with our comprehensive plan, with our small area plans, and to ensure that the conditions developers offer do bring those benefits.
All right. Thank you. Todd, would you respond to question number 2?
Yes, thank you. New development should absolutely be helping us pay for the cost of basic services. This is mostly accomplished through additional property taxes. We are becoming a big city with a lot on our plate. We have to manage multiple priorities at one time. My philosophy is that the first thing we must do before we add new programs, for example, is to accomplish well the basic services that our residents expect, including all the things that were mentioned in the question: police, fire, roads, leaf pickup, park staff, park maintenance, greenway maintenance, and so forth. When I'm looking at the city budget, I want to know that those are being taken care of first. And I think that's where I differ from those on the current council. For example, I think they have failed our police and residents by not giving the police a larger raise, by not addressing the salary compression issue that they are facing in the department, as well as staff retention issues. And also not more aggressively tackling the unsettling number of vacancies we have right now in the police department. So if I'm elected, I will not only make police and fire priority, but all the essential services that we deserve. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Todd. Jennifer? Could you
Thanks.
respond to that question?
Absolutely. First, I'll say that one of the priorities that I have committed to is keeping a budget that reflects the people of Raleigh and the values that we share. I agree with some of my other candidates that the basics are the important part. What we pay our staff, our essential staff, from part-time temporary workers at the pool all the way up to our full-time staff that are making sure things are managed well and run well, that they're getting the money that they deserve, right? And part of why we're growing as a city and our taxes are still going up is that we want to take care of those people that are providing the services to our residents. As Jane mentioned, some of the property tax increase for this budget year went to those raises. We need to make sure that people are taken care of that work for the city. And as we grow, the people that want services also grows. That said, development does pay a lot of taxes, more than most single family homeowners. In fact, most of the city's revenue for property taxes comes from downtown. What's expensive for services is sprawl. And we need to be honest about that. As we expand our city and we make choices for the past several decades that meant that we expanded as single family homes, that cost us money today. And adding density will help us to make sure that people are paying a fair share of the property taxes and that larger developments are also paying for it.
Thank you. Rob, would you please respond to that question?
You hear me because I just got disconnected and reconnected quickly. But the answers by the other candidates are all relatively solid comments. And to expand upon it, I'm going to go back to the hockey analogy. So I've played men's league ice hockey since I was 8.
You're frozen up.
Are you losing me?
You back?
I'm going to keep talking.
Oop, maybe they moved you. Maybe that'd help.
Okay.
There you go.
I'm going to start over. So again, many of my northern friends have come down here and they decry the expensive tax rates in their northern cities. So as we expand our services in the city, we can expect to pay more in taxes. So if elected to city council, I would take a thoughtful approach to what exactly are we adding. We did talk about adding more money to or increasing the payroll for our city staff, which I fully support. Inflation is hitting us all, and those people need to be able to afford to stay here. Be nice if more could actually live here, especially the firemen who most don't live in the city limits. But we need to keep all of that in check. And we'll get to, I'm sure, the parks bond at some point in this conversation. That's a huge tax that we're going to levy on our citizens. And so going to the point of, it seems like we're doing this wrong. Well, our current city council voted to go with the highest third option on the parks bond instead of going with the reasonable first option or slightly more expensive second option. So it starts with city council passing these bonds.
Were you frozen back up? Okay.
More taxes and make.
We just got some. Are you back?
I'm back. I don't know why it's happening.
Yeah.
Hopefully you heard what I said.
Most of it, almost all of it. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So we'll move on to question number 3. And question number 3, we'll start first with Todd. Are you in favor of eliminating the neighborhood conservation overlay districts that have been established in District D, Raleigh Heights, for example? And if so, why?
The answer is no. I don't support a wholesale elimination of the overlay districts in recognition that the effort to approve a district of this nature is long, arduous, and complex for neighborhood advocates. It's a matter of respect for our neighbors and integrity for the city to hold its promises. Now, with that said, over time, as our city grows and changes in its views and needs, overlay districts should be updated and revised to reflect the view of the community today, with the goal of providing more housing and effective transit like the BRT, which requires that the city council gets serious about putting density in the appropriate places, such as our busiest transit corridors. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Let me just suggest in the next time you might want to speak a little louder. I think everybody heard you, but it was for some of us whose older ears is a little harder, a little louder. Okay. Jennifer, would you please be the next to respond?
Thanks. Neighborhood conservation overlay districts are a piece of our zoning code that allows neighborhoods to petition to add extra rules that change what can be built and how it can be built in their neighborhood. And I believe that they need to be reconsidered and studied, not necessarily eliminated, but we need to take a look now that they've been in place for some time at what their impact is, both positive and negative. There's nothing wrong with neighbors making agreements together. There's nothing wrong with bringing forward new ordinances as neighbors that agree to them. But what the whole city needs to do and what the city council is responsible for is looking out for everyone in the city. So we need to study the neighborhood conservation over districts and ask ourselves, who do they benefit and who do they hurt? What is the impact that they're truly having? Because one thing that we have seen is that if NCOD rules are too restrictive, when growth is happening, it gets prevented in those neighborhoods and pushed to other neighborhoods. So we really need to take a holistic approach to understanding the impact that they're having on the city overall.
So am I hearing you saying that while you support them generally, you think it's a time for a significant study to be done on their impact? Is that basically?
That's true.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Rob, would you please go next?
I hope you can hear me. So I've been kicked off
so
twice
too.
since then. So let's hope I don't get kicked off again.
If I can't hear you, I'll grab my ear, okay? You'll know it.
Well, if I can see you, because the last few times you went away as well. So
Okay.
we'll see.
Right.
So the NCODs, I once lived in Boylan Heights. I lived in Boylan Heights for a long time and renovated 2 lovely homes over in Boylan Heights. And it was not exactly an NCOD, but it was in a historic overlay district, or the Raleigh Historic District Commission was in charge of it. That may accomplish what the NCODs are meant to accomplish without giving the neighbors the ability to create more restrictions that would stifle the much needed growth of supply and housing that we do need. So I would not be opposed to the NCODs going away. I understand that they're there now and would respect them if development zoning changes came before City Council. Of course, I would respect them as they're currently in our laws. But I would support revisiting them and possibly for Cameron Park, looking at making it a historic overlay district.
Thank you. Jane?
Yeah. So overlay districts, the idea is to preserve a neighborhood's built characteristics or possibly to conserve natural resources. The NCODs, they do regulate the built environmental characteristics, by lot size, by setbacks, by heights. And the intent is to reduce conflict between new development and existing development, to put some parameters in place. And so when I think about NCODs, they are very much related to zoning. So what's the purpose of zoning? Why do we have different kinds of zonings? Sometimes it is for safety and welfare. We have industrial zoning in some areas and residential in others. Sometimes it's for light, air, open space. It's for natural resource protection. Sometimes it's to deal with congestion, overcrowding. Sometimes it's for economic development, growth management. And so for me, I feel as though the NCODs, they do serve a certain purpose in Raleigh in terms of creating and sustaining some very unique neighborhoods. North Boylan, Royling Acres, Trailwood, Oberlin Village. We have 17 NCODs across the city. I've been in all of them in District D. And I would support their, continuing. I don't know, what the process is in the future of looking at new ones, but I would be open to, kind of evaluating those types of impacts.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the fourth question, and we'll start with Jennifer on this one. What is your view on how to best achieve affordable housing while preserving the character and quality of life in existing neighborhoods? Jennifer?
Thanks. I've said this before, and I think it's important to repeat. The best way to achieve affordable housing, the best thing we can do in Raleigh is to build more housing. In order to build more housing, we have to build differently than we've built for the past half century. And we have to focus our efforts on building dense, mixed-use, walkable neighborhoods. In addition to building more housing, we need to build subsidized, affordable housing. We have to increase both the supply and the subsidy that we provide for housing. That will require coming together as existing residents and also welcoming new neighbors. I firmly believe that welcoming new neighbors does not harm neighborhood character. We need to be honest about this, and we need to talk together about how we can appreciate the people that are moving into our city because they like our quality of life. It is absolutely possible to build more housing and maintain our quality of life. I told you guys, I'm an optimist. You can have both things. They're not in conflict.
One of the questions I think on all these things we're proposing for cities goals is, what are the metrics to say it's working? We're satisfied with the progress. And right now we're losing far more affordable housing units than we're building by far, like a factor of 3 or 4. I forget what statistic I've had, but we're losing ground very quickly. So what would be, if you all, as you're talking about addressing this, what would be some metrics that say we're moving fast enough? Are you satisfied with what we're doing, or do we need to do something to make progress instead of losing ground, at least hold steady or make progress on it?
Certainly, we need to keep measuring the housing units that are being built. But we also need to continue to measure. We just implemented some progressive reforms that will help make it easier to build housing. We need to keep studying those and measuring the effect that they're having. We're already seeing permits for residential units going up. I think we'll continue to see that trend, but we also need to incentivize what we're seeing happening to, like I said, it's math. We need to build more.
Okay, thank you. Rob, would you respond to that question?
Rob, I think you're muted on your, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I just unmuted. So Jennifer hit it right on the head. We need more supply. That's the easy answer. So we need more supply of housing for the people, the throngs of people that are moving to Raleigh, and we need to avoid or leave our old moniker of sprawly behind. I did spend about 8 years living on Rock Service Station Road, which is out on 27603 out in unincorporated Wake County, pocketed between Garner and Fuquay. And over that 8-year period I was there, traffic just ballooned, and that was people that live and work, or excuse me, work and play in Raleigh, eat in Raleigh, kids involved in Raleigh sports.
We've lost you.
Coming to the city, it's coming to our neighboring towns, it's coming to neighboring counties as well. Last Wednesday, by Wake Up Wake County, I shared a statistic that 28% of Americans live alone. Let's just call it a quarter of Americans live alone. One solution that's been already accepted by the city is the ADU, accessory dwelling unit. And if we can promote that within our city and get our property owners to invest in ADUs, we can quickly see new housing supply brought on that doesn't have to go through a large rezoning process or get major investment from out-of-town investors putting money into it. It can be done by our neighbors, by our citizens. Furthermore, I'd like to see density along the bus rapid transit corridor. If we want to become a city where you can navigate with public transit and your bicycle and walking, we need to make housing in those areas where you can do that. I'm getting waved at. Hey, Mitchell.
Okay. All right.
It's just a polite wave.
There's a polite way. It certainly was. Okay. Jane, would you respond to that question, please?
Yeah. So Jen mentioned two of what I think of three of the total ingredients here for affordable housing. We have supply, we have subsidy, but we also have stability, which is something missing in Raleigh right now. Rents went up 20% in the last year. They went up 20% the year before. A lot of our houses have doubled in value. Great if you own, not so easy if you rent. And if you do move and sell your house, I don't know where you're going. So just because we build doesn't mean that we achieve affordable housing. Demand is growing at such a clip, and all new housing costs more than old housing. The cost of labor, the cost of land, the cost of construction, all of the materials. So we also have to think about how do we preserve our currently naturally occurring affordable housing. So in District D, we have a lot of affordable housing already. I'm thinking of West Grove Tower, for example, on Western Boulevard. I was just looking at the prices. They had a studio that went for maybe $580 per month just a year ago, and now it's going for $845 a month. So these are 300 square feet, maybe 350 square feet. They had a new owner purchase that property this summer. And so as we redevelop, we are seeing higher costs. We also have to be bold on the issue of stability. When I think about stability, I'm talking about tenant protections, rent stabilization, and affordable housing requirements for new developments.
Okay, thank you. And Todd, I think you're the last to respond to this question.
Okay, yes, thank you for the question. On housing affordability and affordable housing, the city has made progress on a number of fronts, but despite those efforts, the housing crisis has gotten worse. So I think we can and we must do more. We need more market rate housing to put downward pressure on rents and housing prices. And of course, we have a great and growing need for affordable housing for low to moderate income residents in our city. To the issue of preserving essential neighborhood character, I think we need balance. Raleigh is changing. We can all see that. I've been here nearly 3 decades, and we've changed quite a bit during that time. but we are, of course, facing an unprecedented growth wave. So we will need to accept some change, but I believe there's room for balance again. Preservation of the essential character of a neighborhood, but with additional infill, diverse middle housing, et cetera. Growth brings challenges, certainly, but it also brings opportunities. So let's tackle those challenges together and leverage the opportunities so we create a prosperity that all can share in. It's true that the current council has pushed forward some real change to how we can develop. I don't see us going backwards on that wholesale. However, where we need to tweak those things as we roll them out and implement them, I think that's a conversation absolutely worth having. I also do think one area where we can do more is the preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing, such as more support for the Raleigh Area Land Trust. That contributes to both preserving neighborhood character while also preventing displacement. We should be putting just as much effort into that preservation as we do new builds. Apologies.
Thank you. Okay, so the last question that's been prepared is a long one. You all have seen it, but the folks here have not. And so we caution them when they submit their questions, don't make it as long as this one, but it's a good question. There seems to be two schools of thought about desirable density in Raleigh. One is to increase density in every part of the city by adding tall buildings on every thoroughfare and allowing ADUs, or alternative dwelling units, houses, apartment buildings, and businesses in every residential neighborhood. The other is to limit density to major transit corridors where light rail service or bus rapid transit service is planned in order to ensure that these transit routes have riders if and when they come to fruition. Which approach do you favor and why? And we'll start with Rob on this one.
Okay, so if you get to 11-8-22 and you vote for me, you're voting for option 3, which is combination of the two. I don't believe these two need to be treated as separate options. As I stated before, I fully support the ADUs. I would go a step further and say we need to support ACUs, which are accessory commercial units. And then we also need to build more density along our bus rapid transit corridors. We've spelled that out for years now. The comprehensive plan spells that out. As light rail happens, if we get federal funding, if the affordable, push them. If we can get the state to give the city the right to give tax abatement or tax credits to families that do decide to build an ADU, I would be all for it. So option 3 would be Baumgart on 11-8.
All right, thank you. Jane, would you respond?
Yeah. So, we have single family houses, townhouses, apartment buildings across District D. I have friends who live in multiplex units, friends who rent, friends who own. I have once lived in an accessory dwelling unit or a granny flat for 2 years. My husband and I, we just barely kept it together. It was good for a time. And I will say, a lot of these dwellings, they're not uncommon in our area. We do have this variety. And in recent years, though, I think the question is about what's the process for allowing these, properties by right and where. And so the review process to make zoning changes has changed dramatically. And I do believe in the need for some checks and balances. When we add density, there are real traffic impacts. There are environmental impacts. We have to figure out how we're mitigating those impacts as we infill. So I'm very much in favor of density along our transit corridors. And I'm also, again, thinking about as we redevelop, how do we avoid pushing people out of our neighborhoods? So we've got to focus on that stability piece in the housing market. Otherwise, all of this infill, who is it for? I want to make sure that everyone can call Raleigh home, whether you live here today or you're coming here tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. And Jennifer, would you respond to the question, please?
Sure.
Yes, to
Switching up the order.
the fifth question. Yeah. Am I out of order? Oh, I
Yeah.
skipped. I beg your pardon. You're right. I'm out of order. Todd is next.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I think the question sort of suggests two extremes. And I think the answer and the approach is somewhere in the middle. I do believe we should focus a great deal of density into our downtown core, the major growth nodes and into transit corridors. Of course, focusing density in this way will reduce long-term dependence on cars over time, that will reduce emissions, have positive impacts on climate change. And I think it will enhance the quality of life for all Raleigh residents and equity. Over time, that density will also facilitate the success of the BRT and commuter rail. It's sort of like one feeds the other. And I believe that's a people-centered strategy. With that said, I don't think it's an either or. We can also add more incremental density into some residential neighborhoods without undue burden. It will be different for sure, but I believe there are ways to do that without completely losing the essential character of these areas. Also, though, there is a limit to what density and types of infill and redevelopment that should occur within these developments. And so I will support reasonable and practical approaches in this regard.
Thank you. And now, Jennifer, please.
Thanks. The short answer is that we need to add density in both these ways. We need to add density throughout the city, and we need to add density along our transit corridors. It doesn't have to be extreme, and it doesn't have to be divisive. Raleigh is a city, and true sustainability and equity mean that we need to reduce the sprawl of our city. We have to build up. We've got 1.5 to 2 times as many people that will want to be living in Raleigh by 2040 than live here now. And we need to make space for them. And we need to reduce the amount of housing that we're pushing out into the exurbs and the rural counties that will increase our carbon footprints and be bad for the environment. That's why I've been advocating for adding density for quite some time. I mentioned at the last forum that it's surprising to hear some of the other folks running in this race are for some of these things because they haven't been to meetings to speak for them. I have. It's why I started going to council meetings years ago to challenge the past council's plan to make the right to build a backyard apartment a popularity contest for 10 acres of your neighbors to decide whether you were worthy to have one. That's my why. It's one of the big reasons I'm running for council, because I know that gentle density within our neighborhoods, like accessory dwelling units, duplexes, and small home businesses is good for our neighborhoods. It's good for our environment, and it's good for our neighbors. It helps preserve neighborhoods through time by letting them grow incrementally. And we need to build truly dense transit corridors. We have 2 bus rapid transit lines in our district. I've been an advocate from the community side, and now for the past 1.5 years as a representative on the Go Raleigh Transit Authority, helping to move those bus rapid transit projects forward. The success of those projects, including the federal funding for them, relies on us getting the land use right and adding density along the corridors. So we really do need to grow the city, both in our neighborhoods and in our transit corridors.
Thank you. Thank you. That completes our respondents to the prepared questions. And now we're going to turn over to Mitch, who's going to forward some questions from the participants, the 100, however many, you got 160 participants. Mitch?
Yes. Thank you, Mike. And thank you all for, handling our homework, our prepared questions. I really appreciated your responses and also your respect for the time and also other candidates. That's an important part of this forum. And as we move into unprepared questions, I know it might take a moment to, build a response or just kind of answer these questions. But we are going to keep our time still. We're looking at 90 seconds, but some of these are yes or no questions. I encourage you to be concise and direct. I'm not your campaign consultant, but we appreciate direct answers in District D, the best district in Raleigh. Wonderful. So I am going to focus the questions. Excuse me. I also am going to, we're talking to a mysterious audience here, but we have about 100 people, listening in tonight. For the attendees, if you're looking at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button. Many of you have submitted questions already. But if you haven't found that yet, please do use that function to submit your question. And if we have time for it, I'm happy to moderate that. But yeah, so I am going to start by focusing questions that are kind of for everyone. But if we have time, I think there are some to specific candidates. I'm happy to offer that too. But you should also be willing and able to answer questions from the community. And hopefully at the end, we can share some contact information or just how to get in touch with you too. Okay, end of my opening spiel. Let's see, I'm going to start with, okay, wonderful. And then I will start with our alphabetical order and then kind of go from there, but just bear with me here. But our first question comes from a resident. So what do you believe is the best approach to maintain and improve current environmental protections in our city as an equal consideration to building development goals? And I'll also copy this into our panelist chat. So I'll give you a moment there, but we are going to start alphabetically. So we're going to start with Rob for this cycle.
Having a hard time seeing the question. Is it in the chat now? There we go.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so the question is, what do you believe is the best approach to maintain and improve current environmental protections in our city, as well as equal consideration to development goals? I was interviewed by the Sierra Club, and I did mention to them that while I have been to a number of national parks, I actually went to one on Saturday. I went to New River Gorge National Park, and I love taking my boys to them. If the development called for density along a bus rapid transit corridor, 3 or 4 live that need to be knocked down to make way for 400 houses, I would knock those trees down. We have a larger problem with sprawl than we do grow out into Fuquay or Wake Forest or Lewisburg and our surrounding towns and cities. Equal consideration of building. Okay, so I think I answered the question. I'm done.
Thank you, Rob. Well, alphabetically, I have Jane. I studied my alphabet, so hopefully I'm order here, but Jane, I think you're next.
Yeah, just a few ideas. I would love to see a more robust tree preservation ordinance for Raleigh. So, Wilmington, for example, they preserve certain trees of a certain size, a certain species. I know in some cases, we're not going to be able to preserve, as many trees that we're taking down on a given lot, but perhaps the developer can put some funds into a tree fund so that we are, planting trees elsewhere. And I'm going to advocate for no net tree loss when possible. I will take a page from Todd from our last candidate forum. I love the idea of an Office of Resiliency or Resiliency Czar. Our infrastructure needs so much work. It's, unfortunately for cities across America, it's very tough. Cities across the world, we have got to invest in our stormwater infrastructure. There are, smaller things we can do besides, increasing our pipe size. I was just visiting a neighbor the other day who installed a rain garden, and she received a rebate from the City of Raleigh to do that. So making sure that we're communicating even those kind of small scale, simple fixes. I love that development is no longer happening in the floodplain. That was something the current council did that I was in favor of. And so I think there's a number of protections we can look at to make sure that we are protecting our water quality, preserving the quality of life, which I do believe, is very much tied to our environment here.
Thank you. Next, I have Todd for this question.
Yes, thank you for that question. I do not believe that environmental protection and economic growth are mutually exclusive. We can do both of those things. I want to mention that a big part of my 25-year career has been devoted to helping communities protect the environment while growing. And I'll take that perspective to the city council if elected. One of the areas that I agree with Jane on is that we do need to preserve and protect our tree canopy. It helps with soil and sedimentation and erosion control. It also helps with climate change, both from a heat and temperature perspective, and also from a stormwater perspective. So I think that's a big part of our resilience as a community, and we're known as the City of Oaks, so we need to build on that. And then we need strong stormwater controls. One of the recommendations I've made as part of my campaign is to make sure we take climate change into account as a part of our new stormwater designs. And in places where we have not taken that into account, we may need to go back and retrofit that for the future. I led a study, a nationwide study for the US EPA, where we looked at both stormwater and climate change and gave recommendations for communities on how to adapt. One of the results we landed on was that green stormwater infrastructure is indeed more resilient. And as a city, we should be leading on that, both for our projects as well as private development.
Thank you, Todd. And I have Jen as our last, Jennifer for our last response.
Thanks. It's a great question. I think, like some of the other candidates, I'm also an environmentalist at heart. I mentioned at the beginning, I'm trained in civil engineering and architecture. I've designed stormwater catchment basins. I've designed parking lots. I've designed beautiful restaurants and bars. This is something I do every day, is take projects like the ones that this question addresses to permit in Raleigh and cities across North Carolina. And what I think is the best approach is to write rules and expectations into the code. So I'm really excited about the small lot tree canopy rules that have been in development by staff and at the leadership of Councilor Nicole Stewart. Those things are going to need to be decided on by the next council. I really think that when we incorporate rules that protect water and trees and these environmental considerations into the rules, they make it possible for everyone to be held to the same standard, and for folks who are building or housing or building other buildings to know what to expect. And we don't have to have the argument at every single rezoning, because we know that some of these things like stormwater are taken care of in the rules. And I think we have some of that now. Of course, we can always improve as the climate changes, as things change in our environment. We need to look at those rules regularly. And the second thing I'll say is I think we, big picture, improve environmental conditions by reducing sprawl, like I've already said tonight, and also by investing in our park system. If we build densely where we can and we preserve parks and green space, then we have a balance that is actually achievable and beneficial to everyone in Raleigh.
Thank you. Okay, wonderful. So that we got through that, our first live question. So we'll move on to a next question, and I'll again start the order over. I'm going to go for this question. This resident, and I will copy this into the chat before I ask it to give you all a little more time to get settled. But this resident says, sidewalks and alleys are not sexy topics, but what priority would you place on sidewalks and alleys in Raleigh's future growth? Thank you. For this question, we'll start with Jane. So hopefully you can see it in the chat there, and then whenever you're ready.
Yeah, sidewalks are absolutely a priority for me. I'd like to know a little bit more about exactly what you're looking for with the alleys. And I might be in favor of those too. Just want to better understand what you're bringing up there. But, sidewalks are missing in lots of parts of our city. Neighbors of mine with kids, they don't trust, their high schoolers to even get to the high school and to be safe walking, 5 or 10 minutes down the road. And that's a real issue. I think our greenways are amazing, but we have got to build out our pedestrian infrastructure throughout the city. And we're very much backlogged in that. And so that would be a priority of mine, looking for additional funding opportunities for that. I am a bicycle commuter, so I use the greenways all the time. And I really value that resource. So this is definitely a priority for me.
Thank you. Next up on our rotation is Todd. Todd, talk to us about sidewalks and alleys.
Yes, thank you. We absolutely need a strong multimodal strategy in the city that moves, of course, transit like the BRT forward, but also that creates additional bike path opportunities and connectivity all around the city. I have proposed that Raleigh develop a comprehensive mobility plan that includes some really robust community engagement so that we can assess the current state of multimodal in the city across all different types. Let's find the gaps, and then let's use that to chart a long-term strategy. I think that's going to take really thoughtful planning and courageous investment over the long term to really make a difference. But I think we can do that as a city if we all work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Next is Jennifer.
Yes, I love sidewalks. The 15 years I spent living in the district, I've primarily gotten around by riding the bus, walking and biking. Sidewalks are a critical infrastructure and one that we don't spend enough money on. I think that truly prioritizing sidewalks is really a budget question. We need it not to take 30 years to build a sidewalk. When I first started going to the Southwest CAC meetings, when I moved into this part of town, I learned that they've been trying to get sidewalks on Carolina Pines for nearly 30 years, bond after bond after bond, and that's not good enough. We've got to continue reforming how we ask for sidewalks. This council started that, but there's still a backlog of projects because this is about budget. We need to look critically at that budget and say, how are we going to raise more money to actually build the sidewalks where they need to be so that moms like me don't have to walk across bridges that don't have sidewalks next to 45-mile-an-hour cars. I've been there, I've done it, I still do it, and it's not safe. We need to find the money, or we need to move it from other things like car lanes, or something else. We need to invest the money in sidewalks.
Thank you. And we have Rob finishing us up with this question.
So like the other candidates and probably everyone here on this panel watching tonight, I love our sidewalks. I use them often. I have a dog named Joy who I walk to the dog park frequently. I also do drive sometimes. Jennifer's probably seen me drive by her house on the way there, but I do use the sidewalks. I have 2 young boys, 12 and 9 years old, who use the sidewalks as well. Riding their bikes. I know they should be in the road, but they do use the sidewalks. So we should make sidewalks an imperative when we're building new development. As far as existing neighborhoods where we don't have sidewalks, I believe we have easements in most of those neighborhoods where we can implement them and build them. I as well am looking forward to Carolina Pines getting a sidewalk, creating connectivity between Lake Wheeler and South Saunders. That'll be phenomenal. And one more layer to add on to this, I would love to see more safe crossings of 40. I was an ITBer for many, many years, and my family joked that I never left inside the Beltline when I was in my young 20s and early 30s. Now that I live outside the Beltline, it's not safe to ride a bike across some of our bridges, and I would like to see better sidewalk connectivity across 440.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, we've talked about sidewalks. Let's move on. I'm seeing some questions pop up around the idea of housing and how it relates to rentals. So I'm going to kind of dive into those questions. So we'll spend some time there. I think I will keep them separate. They're on the same topic, but I do want to make time for both of these questions. So I'm going to pop this one in here. So this question comes from a resident here. Do you support the ability to rent entire homes as short-term rentals 365 days a year? Airbnb as an example. So the question's there in the chat for you to read and develop, but we have Todd starting off this iteration. So Todd, when you are ready, take a stab.
Sorry, would you mind repeating that one more time?
No worries. So do you support the ability to rent entire homes as short-term rentals 365 days a year? And then it has Airbnb as an example.
Yes.
Great. Thank you for your directness. We'll go to Jennifer.
Yes, I support Airbnbs both for partial house and whole house rentals. I think folks are running businesses and paying their own mortgages with what we're doing with Airbnbs. And we have a program in place to monitor whether it's having an impact on housing supply.
Thank you. We have Rob next.
I support Airbnbs as rental. We should maintain our property rights and give the citizens the right to use the property as they see fit. If we do expand the ADU program, if the state allows us to encourage the ADU program, I did see a question in the Q&A about ADUs not being only used for Airbnb. I think if we can incentivize our citizens to build an ADU and only receive tax credits if they agree to rent to a certain income threshold or keep their rent rate at a certain rate for 1 year, lease term becoming all Airbnbs. And also remember supply and demand. If we get too many Airbnbs in Raleigh, the price is going to go down. And landlords like myself, I am a super host on Airbnb, will say this isn't worth it. I'm just going to rent it to a single family person. So there is the law of economics in our favor as well.
Thank you, Rob. And yes, you have spoiled the other question I'm going to be asking, which is totally okay. I'll have the other candidates will have a chance to respond to that question after as well. But I do want to just kind of wrap up this one first for other two candidates, because next we have Jane. Jane, if you have the response there on 365.
Yeah, I'm okay with short-term rentals year-round, but I do believe we need to monitor that and ensure that it's not hurting supply of especially long-term rentals, because that is such a concern right now. I do also wonder about the possibility of some kind of tax, and I know that sounds scary for folks, but hotels do provide some taxes to the city, to the state, for those services, and so I'm curious if other cities have gone that route.
Thank you. We started there with Todd and we wrap back around. So I will post that second question that talks about rentals as it relates to ADUs. So if you support ADUs as a means to increase housing supply, how do you keep a majority of them from becoming short-term rentals? So we'll go through the same order there again. We have some feedback, but if Todd, if you're willing to start us off there.
Is Jim next?
I'm keeping the same order there just because we related the same question, if that's
Okay, I'm sorry, can you read the rest out? I was writing it down.
totally all right. Yes, if you support ADUs as a means to increase housing supply, how do you keep a majority of them from becoming short-term rentals?
Yeah, I'm a little bit hesitant to put sort of additional restrictions on their use. I'd like to know more about, is having a majority of them becoming, if a majority of them became short-term rentals, what would be the drawbacks there? I'm certainly open to hearing more about that. I also think we're sort of early in the process here. So, it's going to take some time to actually build a stock of ADUs. And I'm sure we'll learn over time if there are issues, but I am hesitant to provide additional restrictions on their use at this time.
Thank you, Todd. Jennifer, I have you next on this question.
I don't believe that we should restrict the use of accessory dwelling units. I've said that publicly many times. I believe that however folks are renting out their accessory dwelling units or sharing them with family members is their business. And it's also very true, and I've said this many times, that having an accessory dwelling unit makes staying in your home more affordable for you. So regardless of whether you're renting it for short-term or long-term rentals, it is making it more affordable to live in your house. We see on HGTV people talking about income suites. What they're talking about is an accessory dwelling unit. Many people are paying their mortgage while also providing housing or a place to stay for folks that want to visit our city. Both of those things should be allowed.
Thank you, Jennifer. Rob, I know you spoke on this question, but I did want to offer you some equal time to expand if you'd like, or any additional comments.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to double down on property rights. We should give our citizens the right to use their property by right the way they see fit. Now, the other two answers have talked about restrictions. I've been a parent now for actually 14 years. I had a stepson for a good number of years, and then my own boys that are 12 and 9. And I've learned as a parent, there are two ways to change behavior. One is through reprimanding and laying down the law, and the other is encouragement. And so I'm going back to my answer of encouragement. If we can encourage people to build ADUs and give them, if the state allows the city, give them a tax break or give them incentives from the city to keep them as low-income housing or affordable housing, that's a way we can stave off the concern from the question. We don't need to necessarily restrict. Maybe we need to promote.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you, Rob. And then, yes, we started with Todd, so we're wrapping up with Jane for this question.
Yeah, I do agree. I like the idea of a carrot, an incentive versus a stick. So yeah, if we can have tax relief to keep these as long-term rentals, that could be one tool. Again, this is something we need to monitor. You know, there's just overall supply of our rental stock, and so it's not necessarily that ADUs are what is going to keep our long-term renters housed. I don't see that, honestly. It's just one small piece of, you know, housing possibilities, and I think rather we need to again have this very bold vision around stability in the housing market, rent stabilization, affordable housing and new developments, public subsidy that is at a level that can actually meet our needs. But I don't see ADUs as being that kind of quick fix.
Thank you. Okay, let's see what else is in our roster here. Okay, I'm gonna change the topic here. Well, it's all part of the grand scheme of it. This question is from a resident regarding development, but also parking and kind of traffic planning. So I'm going to drop this in our host chat here, but I will read it for everyone. And then we'll be starting with Jennifer, but I'll read it out here for you. I live in Renaissance Park. There are currently upward development going on all around us. Do you support realistic traffic and parking studies performed and shared with current residents, such as those in Renaissance Park, before these developments are approved? And then Jennifer, when you have time to settle with that question, you're welcome to start.
Sure. I'll start by saying I'm not sure what the implication about realistic traffic and parking studies is, but I think in general, these things are covered within our city code. We do have traffic impact analysis that happen at site plans for projects that are large enough to need them. I'm familiar with the couple of apartment buildings that are going up around Renaissance Park. And I know that community was originally planned to include apartment buildings. So those things were taken into consideration when that new urbanist community was originally laid out and planned. Renaissance Park also is on one of our BRT corridors. And I've said earlier tonight that I do believe we need to add that density along those corridors, because I think what we'll see over the coming years is less and less people needing to drive where they have to go, because we have the ability to walk, and we have the ability to bike, and we have the ability to ride the bus where we need to go. And it takes density to get those things. Many of us in Southwest Raleigh want more retail that's walkable. We want more services that are walkable. And the way that we get those is by having enough people to support those businesses that would provide the retail and service. And the way that we do that is density.
Thank you. We started here with Jennifer, so we're moving over to Rob.
Yeah, so I don't live far from Renaissance Park, and I take my children to school every morning right by those. I believe it's 5 new buildings that are going up, and the wood sat out there forever and didn't move. Then all of a sudden, wham, you had 5 or 6 story buildings going up. So I hear what you're saying, but that was actually an old airport. Renaissance Park was one of our first airports, and I believe Amelia Earhart landed there, which is fascinating. But that was planned, and that was done with a traffic study. And now that we have Tryon Road with 4 lanes, thank God we might be able to handle all the additional traffic that's coming that way. That was a long time coming. We had to wait on the railroad bridge to get built before the city could finish that. And I'm very thankful as a local citizen that did get done. So I do think transit or traffic impact studies are done, and they are respected. And they are required in the development process. So yes, I support them. If elected to council, I would, of course, take that into consideration when approving a new development. Say, hey, did you do this part of it? And then trust our staff, our city staff, who are professionals in this, to give the correct recommendations to the 8 people sitting on city council. But yes, to your question.
Thank you, Rob. Next on my rotation here is Jane. Jane, if you
Yeah.
have That's the question.
I do support realistic traffic and parking studies, before developments are approved when they are at a certain scale. Jen mentioned that there is, TIA at site planning, but there can also be in the approval of the zoning process, that can be a request the council makes to staff. It's definitely a bit of uncertainty of, what's going to be built, what it's going to look like. But we can at least get some gist of what is the upward trajectory of traffic and what would be maybe the average or expected level. And those are important things to talk about. I really want to see this city be accessible by a pedestrian, by a bicyclist, by someone on a scooter. Those are things that I love, and I've lived in places where that's possible, and it's very freeing. But we also have to think about what is the order of operations, I believe, with our infrastructure. So right now, our bus service, for example, we have decreased frequency of bus service on 12 routes recently. Several of them in District D, in the Carolina Pines neighborhood, Method Park neighborhood. It goes back to those basic services that we have not been able to take care of, unfortunately, in these current times. So I do have this vision of a denser urban landscape that is walkable, that is livable, where you can walk to the bakery or to the post office, all those kinds of things I would love to see. But we also have to be somewhat realistic on the time frame of when these things will happen. And so I think that's maybe what the question is getting at about realistic, when are we going to have these options? So it's a bit of a chicken and the egg, and I know it's tough. And I respect the question.
Thank you. And I believe we have Todd wrapping us up for this question.
All right, thank you. Yes, I do think we need to consider traffic during the rezoning process. I think the level of analysis probably depends on the size of the project. I think as a matter of principle, the city should not be overburdening our road systems. I have a background in public infrastructure, and I think that experience will be an asset on city council in this regard. With respect to parking, I do understand the concerns about the relatively recent elimination of the parking minimums. However, it's early. And I also think that developers and owners of these assets aren't going to want to burden their residents with difficulty in terms of parking. So I would say, I think to some degree, I think the market should take care of this issue, but we should continue to monitor it. And if problems arise, as a council, we should be ready to pivot or modify previous decisions that have been made.
Thank you, Todd. And thank you everyone for taking on that question. Starting to get some dings about the weather, so I apologize for my distracting if it's dinging through the mic here, but so this question, I'm going to ask it, and I'm going to, ask for, transparent and direct answers, but it is our most, supported question here in the chat tonight is about taking donations from developers. I know there's some open-endedness to that. What is a developer? Who is the development community? But if everyone's willing to kind of, be some direct here about your donations that you've taken as a candidate of this election, especially around this idea of developer donations and how that plays out. We had Jennifer was joining us last time, so we'll start again back with Rob this time.
Sure. So to answer the question, I have taken money from one developer in town, a gentleman named Greg Sandroider. So I own a piece of land on West Street. It's 11 Northwest, and if you've been wrong, you might remember Occupy Wall Street. We had a faction of Occupy Wall Street here in Raleigh. Nancy McFarland was our mayor-elect at the time, and I ended up taking that group in as a group of tenants. So it's this little vacant triangle. And Greg approached me, and he called me up one day. He said, "Rob, I'd like to lease 11 Northwest Street." And I said, absolutely. I would like 3 things from you. One, I'd like your email address and phone number so I can communicate with you if I have questions, as he's a man who's been down the path I want to follow or hope to follow in my future career path. 2, I would like to have coffee with you and sit down to talk about what you're doing at 400H. And then 3, we'll set up a monthly lease rate. So he and I set a meeting 2 weeks out, and this is over a year ago. So this is not during campaign season or anything of that nature. And we met at Whole Foods on Wade Avenue, and we talked for an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, and we never once talked about the lease rate for what he'd be leasing the land for. And at the end of the meeting, we stood up, we shook each other's hands, we had a great talk, and I said, by the way, you're going to pay me X for the lease of this land. I'm not going to share that amount with you, but it was well below what I could have asked him for, considering his tight job area that he was working on. And so the very next time I called him was to say, hey, I'm contemplating running for city council. Would you mind meeting with me and talking with me? And we did. And he did give me a check to help me start off my campaign. All this information is public. You will see the new reports coming out probably in the next week or so, and you'll see it. But it was not a large amount of money. And it was a personal relationship, not someone trying to buy favor.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, next on the rotation here is Jane. If Jane, you'll answer this question.
Yeah, no, I am not taking donations from developers. That being said, I will sit across the table from anyone and everyone who has some business in Raleigh, whether you're a resident, whether you're building, a home, an apartment complex, those are conversations I'm going to have with everyone. Anyone asks me out for coffee, I go. I want to understand, where you're coming from and what your issues are. And I want to be independent from any pressures. And so that's why I've made that commitment. And I've been really pleased with the community support that I've been given to this day. And honestly, just surprised and very, very humbled. And I know these races, they're expensive, they're grueling. It's hard to do this without some money. But I just want to see our politics get away from the money. I would love it, kind of like what we did a couple of years ago, where we put in a resume and a cover letter, and then, just look at people's experience and go off their merits. That would be wonderful to me if then the public could make a decision. So my intent is to take money out of politics whenever possible. It's pretty tough to do, but I'm attempting that in this election.
Thank you, Jane. Next on the rotation here is Todd. Todd, if you'll talk to us.
Yes, thank you. If elected to city council, my decisions, and many of them will be tough decisions, will be based on what I think is in the best interest of the district and the city. I have not placed restrictions on who contributes to my campaign. I have a platform and an approach, and if someone supports that, then they can give to my campaign. Campaign contributions will not play a role in my decision-making on council.
Thank you, Todd. And last, we had Jennifer to wrap up this question.
Thanks. This is an often asked question that we've answered at several forums. I'll start by saying that campaigns do cost money. Every piece of mail, every advertisement, every yard sign is paid for by the campaign committee. And I don't have money of my own to put in my campaign committee. So I accept checks from whoever is willing to write them. And so far, that's included people who build houses, people who live in houses, people who build apartments, people who live in apartments, neighbors, business owners, and developers. What I remind folks is that the people that build buildings in our city also live here, and they're people. And what I also remind folks, similar to what other candidates have said, is that my decisions are mine. If people are donating to my campaign, it's because they trust my ability to make those decisions. It's because they share some, maybe not all, of the values that I've put forward as priorities for the campaign and values that I hold. One of the most important of those is honesty and transparency. Everyone who's donated to my campaign is public record. Every meet and greet, every question I get asked at a forum, I answer honestly and to the best of my knowledge. I'm here honestly and transparently, and a donation of $5,600 is not going to change my mind about values that I've held and have a track record of holding in our community.
Thank you. Okay, so let's see here as we move along. Okay, so I'll go ahead and ask this question. Again, it is, so we're turning to the current council, and it's just a kind of a quick question on how you have reflected on this council and, you know, how you see the current members. But the question from our resident here is, which member of the current council do you admire most and why? So I'll again remind you for direct, concise answers, but also, you know, responding to the residents' question of, you know, who do you admire and why do you admire them? We started last time with Rob, so we are going to start this time with Jane in this rotation.
This is a hard one. I admire different qualities in a variety of counselors. I guess who I want to call out more than anyone, if I'm allowed, is city staff. When city staff are at council meetings, they are staying there late at night, providing the facts, doing the due diligence day in and day out. I see the council as, you know, making decisions, but ultimately, as a counselor, we don't do the work behind the scenes. That makes the city run, that makes our lives, you know, wonderful in Raleigh. And so I'm just going to pivot and say it's the staff that make, you know, anything possible, truly.
Thank you. Next, we have Todd. Excuse me.
Yeah, thanks. I'll start off by saying I am running to be the independent representative of District D. I'm not running on a ticket with another council member or council members or with the mayor. I am running as Todd Kennedy. I think the current council has gotten some things right over the past few years, and they've gotten some things wrong. I highlighted the police issue earlier, so I won't detail that again, but that's one area where I firmly believe they got it wrong. And so if I'm elected, again, I will be the independent representative. Of course, I will have to work with all the other councilors who are elected to move Raleigh forward, and that's what I'll be focused on.
Thank you, Todd. Next on the rotation is Jennifer.
Thanks. It's no secret that I've supported some of the actions that the current council has taken. Many of them are progressive zoning reforms, removal of parking minimums, and other things that are asked about in the chat. The affordable housing bond. There's many good things that the current council has accomplished. And I know that folks are mad with different counselors for different reasons, but I think that multiple counselors can be praised for what they've done. Our current District D City Councilor, Stormy Fort, was the first African-American woman to serve on City Council and has really diversified and pushed on diversity issues within city staff. Councilor Nicole Stewart has pushed forward the climate action plan while being on council, is working on a progressive tree ordinance. Councilor Jonathan Melton has been a champion for accessory commercial units, and Mayor Baldwin has fought for affordable housing for many, many years. We have to be able to give credit where credit is due. Even if we disagree on some issues, we should come together and say what we do like and what we do admire. And if you've been paying attention to council for the last several years, there's a lot of good things that have happened in our city because of the leadership we've had.
Thank you. And to wrap up this question is Rob.
Yeah, so I'll make my answer pretty concise. I respect Stormy for stepping up and filling the void that was left and the manner in which she did it. She did not go through a campaign like we are now in the election process, and she was thrown into it. Much like the other 50 people that applied, she was the one selected. Mad props to her for stepping up. I respect that.
Thank you. Okay, so we started with Jane, so we're going to start with Todd for this question. I'm going to pull it. I'm going to revise this question a little with help from the resident here about this idea of newcomers. There's this sentiment that there's new people coming to Raleigh, which is nothing you can ignore. It is true, you know. So it's just kind of on this theme of newcomers to Raleigh and kind of what that means for Raleigh generally. If you could take your allotted time, or just maybe have some thoughts on this idea of newcomers to Raleigh and how city council should be reacting to that. That's an appropriate way to phrase that. So I'll summarize that again. The sentiment around newcomers to Raleigh, new people coming into Raleigh for various reasons. How will you as a council member encourage the council, and how will you build a reaction to this growth?
Sure. I think it starts with housing, right? I mean, folks who are moving here for jobs, for our wonderful quality of life. The first thing they need is housing, and so we need to build more market rate housing, and quickly, and of all types. That's going to help put downward pressure on prices and rental rates, both for those who are currently here and those who would be coming. And so I think that first and foremost is important. And I will go back to this idea of sort of preserving what we love about Raleigh and what's unique about Raleigh, whether it's a neighborhood or someplace along Hillsborough Street. We do need to keep a keen eye on that, and essentially as a community speak to what it is that we love about Raleigh and these places, so that whether it's a developer coming into town or an individual family, they know what Raleigh is all about. And I think in the long run, we'll all benefit from them being here. And I think even though Raleigh will change as it's done over the last several decades, that's been Raleigh's story. I think if we work together, we can make it grow and change in a positive way.
Thank you, Todd. Next on our cycle is Jennifer.
Thanks. It's a great question. And I'll start by saying that Raleigh's always been a growing city. It's a city that was placed here, decided to be here. In my thesis, I mapped what it has grown over the centuries since it was first established. And that means it's always been a city of newcomers. I've been outspoken as a citizen, and I plan to be outspoken as a counselor about the real need to welcome new neighbors. It's unfair to say that you got to move here to Raleigh and someone doesn't get to move here after you. And I've sat in council meetings and I've heard some really awful things be said to the counselors by members of our community against new neighbors, against people who might not look like the person speaking, and other things like that. It's one of the reasons I got engaged and kept coming to speak, because it's sad and it's disheartening to hear neighbors not want to welcome new neighbors. It's the 21st century. We have values of diversity. We have values of respect. And we as council members need to encourage our community members to remember that.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next we have Rob.
So I was a newcomer back in 1999 when I came to state, and I fell in love with the city because of the people and just all that it has to offer. Weather, of course, it was much better than Iowa. It's cold up there. So using our position on council to push back on growing sentiment, I would not stand for citizens speaking out negatively about newcomers during council meetings. Respect, as Jennifer said, is important. Respect.
Just giving Rob one more second in case the audio comes back, but it's connected again.
Being recorded.
I think I got dropped again. I would stand for inclusion for everyone moving to Raleigh.
Thank you, Rob. And then we have Jane wrapping up this question.
Yeah, one of the reasons I love Raleigh is it's so dynamic. There are people that were born here, people from here, many generations. They have the history of the city. They have the wisdom of where this place has been. And then there are new folks that are coming every day that also see what this place can be. In my own, just social networks, I have friends from everywhere. I recently helped to welcome a young group of Afghan women who moved here last year when the Taliban took back over. I'm a host of a sponsor circle for one of these Afghans, and they live just down the street from me. I've helped them figure out how to apply for college, how to get jobs. They are without their families, their ages 18, 19, 20. I work with students at NC State every day that are coming here for the first time, and they're deciding, do I want to stay in Raleigh after I graduate, or am I going somewhere else? I want young people to see themselves here. I want this to be a place for all generations. It worries me that I see folks not being able to afford it. To say, I'm in my 20s, I don't make enough money for Raleigh. And so we have to have, I think, all of our generations getting to know each other, connected with one another, generations, again, of people from here, of new folks. So I'm very much of the mindset, I think, of everyone, that, anyone in our community is part of our community.
Thank you, Jane. Okay, I'm going to offer one more question from the audience, and then I think we will have time to probably have some closing statements. We'll probably limit those to about a minute. Everyone's been respectful of the time. Thank you so much for that, but we'll probably wrap up with this question. But this question is around back to community engagement, but it is specifically at city council meetings. So I will not accurately define all the changes or kind of, recent developments or considerations around public input, but effectively everything from time allowed to speak at a city council meeting, the allocation of time during a specific case, or kind of the sides. There's been recent changes around the size of the sign you can bring to a meeting. And then, of course, setting aside for a moment the COVID changes, that just because we're not specific for different reasons, but there. And then, of course, a very recent change about adding the voicemail option to public comment. It was kind of an ongoing discussion about the legality around the remote comments, kind of remote interaction with the city council. So maybe just, I know that's kind of a long-winded to say, as a council member, you are at least one part of the meeting rules and the meeting interactions with the public. And while you can't, you are not running for mayor and don't have the chair of the council there, you do contribute to setting the decorum and interaction of the public. So could you take some time about a vision or plan around any changes or kind of reactions to public input at city council meetings? Thank you for dealing with that question creation there, but I apologize. I do not have who we started. Oh, Jane wrapped up. So we started with Todd on that. So we'll start with Jennifer for this question.
Thanks. I think citizen engagement at city council meetings is one of the most important things that we should support. I was really excited when this council originally switched council signups from being 2 weeks ahead of time before a city council meeting to being the same day. And of course, that had to adjust with COVID. So I look forward to that same day sign up coming back. I think there was a benefit to being able to learn what was happening in real time as the news articles and the community came together on the same day as council meetings. As someone who's had signs thrown up or had folks make comments while I'm speaking, I think that some rules of decorum are needed. Whether we've gotten the balance exactly right with recent adjustments, I'm not sure. I think that would need to be a conversation amongst all 8 folks that are elected in November. But I do support making sure that people have equal time real time to express their comments, the full 3 minutes, and also multiple options. I've asked for hybrid meetings for not just council meetings, but board and commission meetings multiple times. I think we really need to explore what our options there are and push on the legislature if necessary to make sure that as local municipal governments, we're able to exercise everything, every right that we should be able to stay in touch with our community and have our community members stay in touch with the elected officials.
Thank you, Jennifer. We're wrapping back to Rob. And Rob, I have you muted.
Yeah,
Okay.
did you see my note down there at the bottom? My connection did it again. If you can either repeat the question shorter, or post it.
Sure. Yes, on the theme of city council, public interaction at city council meetings, there is public comment, there's signs, there's other ways to engage. There's also been recent changes and other just kind of ways to approach that. You are 1/8 of the council. You do have obligation to contribute to the discussion and kind of setting that decorum rules. What is your vision or kind of reaction to public contributions at city council meetings?
So we should allow public contribution at public meetings, also allow it online, also allow people to bring signs. And I'm going to go back to my parenting skills here. I tell my boys frequently, and I show them this in my daily life, that people respond in kind. So as 1/8 of city council, if I am polite and professional with you, I would expect you to be polite and professional with me, in response. So people respond in kind. I believe the 8 people on council should set a good example.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, next we have Jane.
Yeah, I like a couple ideas I've heard. Certainly a hybrid approach for comments. Not everyone can make it in person. We certainly have the technology to do that. I would love to see hybrid board and commission meetings as well. There's some boards that I can watch later on YouTube and others I can't. I don't know why, but I would love to be able to have that kind of access. I think a lot of maybe what we're seeing in some of the temper of or tenor of what goes on in public comments is about being heard. It's folks feeling like no one's listening to them. And I do think it's important that counselors have time to digest the public comment. If I'm elected to council, I would love to see some separation in the timing between public comments and the decision-making period, because a lot of what's brought to public comment is very important and it helps to shape, I would hope it would help to shape the ideas of what the counselors are thinking. And so really acknowledging the importance of what people are bringing, to acknowledge their frustrations truly, to not dismiss what those are, and to have that open conversation. So, how many minutes that you can speak, it's very tough for folks to get across their ideas in 1 minute. It makes them feel a little extra. So if we can expand that time period to give people the space, it would really help.
I acknowledge the irony of cutting you off there, but we will switch to Todd to wrap us up for the question.
Sure. As a counselor, I will be thoughtful and measured about putting restrictions on how residents can engage. But there are, as was mentioned earlier, practical considerations. We do need decorum. We do need reasonable speaking times. So as a counselor, I will try to avoid, however, to be so reactionary as I think this council has been at times. And I want to get beyond some of the discord and divisiveness. And so, I will lead by example as a counselor in that regard. But I do favor putting in place as many ways that the public can engage and give comments during meetings as possible. For example, I would like to revisit this virtual option. I'm not convinced at the moment that is completely off the table and unreasonable. As a counselor, I would push additional consideration for that specifically.
Thank you so much, Todd. Okay, just making sure I don't have any things or messages here. So I do want to transition to closing. So I think I'm going to frame this as a closing statement, but also an opportunity to talk about something that you feel like you haven't been able to talk about. We're very passionate about things. You all have reasons for why you've chosen to run and kind of be a part of city council. But we don't always have time at these discussions, at these forums, and there's going to be plenty of opportunities outside of this to engage. But just we want to give you the podium for a moment there to just talk about, something you feel like you weren't able to talk about tonight, or even up to this point. And then also as a wrap up, so I'll probably go back to the 2 minutes again, just a closing statement, and especially how we can reach out to you or contact you. And then for the sake of the panelists in the audience, there will be a wrap-up information via email about the recording, about candidates and resources. So we will capture these opportunities too. But just again, in summary, what have you not been able to speak about that you care about? And just kind of wrap up for us. I'm going to switch it up and go reverse alphabetical order here. So we will be starting with Jennifer tonight.
Thanks. Well, to close, I'll briefly talk about one thing I haven't had a chance to talk about that's important to me, and that's our local food and farming community. I've been active with urban agriculture for many years. I met many neighbors in that way, both in the district and all over the city. And last year petitioned for Raleigh to have a comprehensive food plan so that we could come together as a city and build our resiliency around how we feed ourselves. And that's something that I want to prioritize if elected. And then I'll zoom back out to the big picture. I think that the values and priorities of the city are around equity and sustainability and how we grow. Part of that is housing, part of that is transit, part of that's a food plan. I know those things are most important because I hear them from neighbors, but I also believe them. I believe that together we can build a different and better future for Raleigh. That's why I'm running for council. As a designer and a leader and an optimist, I'm committed to listening. I'm trained to know from my background in engineering and architecture that listening alone can help folks come together. Food helps too. We can create positive change when we agree. So if you believe that it's time to move past yes or no in our city and actually talk about how we should build our city's future together, then you should vote for me on November 8th.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Going reverse words, next is Todd.
Yes, again, thank you for the opportunity to be with you all this evening. One idea that I wanted to share before a brief closing statement is an idea. It's around rezoning. I think we need better collaboration between neighbors and developers. And so I'd like to see Raleigh develop a zoning mediator or ombudsman, for example, to help residents participate in the rezoning process in a positive way. The change we need is to minimize the adversarial nature of the process and start working together as a community. As it stands now, city staff are caught in between the council and the developer, leaving them hamstrung in many ways to support affected neighbors. We need balance and a system that promotes an effective process for everyone. And so in close, Raleigh's future is bright. How bright that future depends on what we do to steer it in the right direction. Now is the time to push forward policies that make Raleigh more prosperous, more inclusive, more resilient for everyone. This campaign is built on the ideas to make that happen. It's built on a style that seeks common ground and an elevated tone, because we do need to move past the discord and divisiveness. But most importantly, it's built on experience as a leader in the community. That's been validated by endorsements of our campaign by former mayors Charles Meeker and Nancy McFarland, and more recently, Equality NC and the RPPA Police Association. I bring more relevant experience to this position than anyone else in the race. Experience matters, and we are taking that message to the voters of District D. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Again, our second to last, Jane Harrison.
Yeah, I just want to again thank all the candidates for bringing some great ideas to the table tonight. I'm hopeful that no matter what happens in November, District D, I hope is in great hands. We need leaders with vision, and we need leaders who know how to get things done. I have that experience. I have worked on big, bold ideas And a lot of those ideas, they come from the community, from the needs that I know of firsthand. So just one example, at NC State, when I first came to NC State University, I realized that we did not have paid parental leave. So if you have a baby, if you're adopting, if you have time off, great, built into, if you've been there long enough, that's wonderful. But I decided to work with the Council on the Status of Women to advocate, to do the research, to figure out what policy could be put in place to ensure that when we have a child in our family, that, it can be a time where the parents are not so stressed. So anyway, after 4 years of working on this, taking the policy around, shaping it up with HR at the UNC system level for 17 campuses, 30,000 employees that would be impacted by this policy, we got it done. We got it implemented in 2019. And so now there are 8 weeks of paid parental leave for our employees across the UNC system. I am willing to do things like that for Raleigh, to put in the time. I have the passion and the energy to get the job done. And I don't have a singular agenda. I really am here to understand, to learn. I have gone district, precinct by precinct, neighborhood by neighborhood across District D to understand the needs of neighbors. And so my hope is that I can bring your ideas forward and that, again, we can shape the future together.
Thank you, Jane. And to end us off here tonight.
First of all, thank you for hosting this event, and thank you for all the questions from the people watching, the participants. So my name is Rob Baumgart, and one issue that was not talked about today that is near and dear to my heart, I woke up this morning at 5 a.m. and worked out with a gentleman down and did sit-ups and push-ups right around the state capitol building and up and down Jones Street before the city woke up. Words repeated over and over again: partner, plan, promote. I would love to see our city partner with groups like Healing Transitions or Neighbor to Neighbor or SHIP Community Outreach, that's now my tenant, who are specialists in taking care of homeless or the people who have been unfortunately fallen into drug addiction. As our city grows, we will see more of that, and we as a city need to make sure that we are prepared to handle that. And I would like to see that done through partnerships of our already existing and wonderful community groups out there. So on November 8th, if you would like to vote Baumgart. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And yes, thank you everyone for your attendance tonight and agreeing to come out and handle some of our questions from the residents. So as it was mentioned at the top of the meeting, this event was put on by neighborhood governed collections of residents. This is not sponsored by the city council or other groups or things like that. So we really appreciate taking the time to speak to some of your possible voters, and they should all be voters. So please come up with a plan to vote. Early voting starts fairly soon, and then we of course don't forget to flip that ballot. As I'm speaking, I'm putting on my elections official hat here, that we will be on the back of the ballot this session. So please make a plan to vote and get out there. Thank you to our host, Mike. You're still here with us, but thank you for taking on the first half there. And I guess I'm closing us out tonight. I don't think there's anything else there, but stay safe. The rain's coming. Make a plan. And thanks for coming out tonight.